A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. Chapter 5. The Aristocrat. It was a hot day in Paris. The Marquis Saint-Evremond was angry. He left the palace of the king's minister. The minister had not spoken to Saint-Evremond. The minister was too busy. He was drinking chocolate. The Marquis got into his coach. "Go quickly," he shouted to the driver. "Drive to the chateau." The coach went quickly through the streets of Paris. People ran away. People were afraid of the Marquis. They were afraid of the Marquis's coach and horses. Suddenly, there was a terrible cry. The driver stopped the horses at the side of the road. People came out of their houses. The Marquis shouted to the coach driver, "What is wrong?" "Monsieur the Marquis," said the driver, "a child ran in front of the coach. The horses kicked the child." "The child is dead," shouted somebody in the crowd. "Dead," cried a tall man. "Jacques, my child is dead." "Who is the father of the child?" shouted the Marquis. "It is Gaspard," said a voice. "Gaspard," shouted the Marquis, "here is some money." The Marquis threw a gold coin out of the window of the coach. Nobody moved. Nobody picked up the coin. Everybody was afraid of the Marquis. They were afraid of rich and powerful aristocrats. Then somebody threw the gold coin back into the coach. The aristocrat looked at the crowd of people. He hated them. He spoke to the coach driver. "Drive to the chateau," he said. The coach moved away from the crowd. The Marquis forgot about the dead child. A man ran after the coach, but the Marquis did not see him. In the evening, the coach arrived at the chateau of Saint-Evremond. Gabelle, an old servant, was waiting for the Marquis. "Monsieur the Marquis," said Gabelle, "I was watching your coach. A man was holding on to the back of the coach." "A man? Where is he?" asked the Marquis. "He jumped into the bushes beside the road," replied Gabelle. "Find him, quickly!" shouted the aristocrat. "Now, has Monsieur Charles arrived? Has he come from England?" "No, Monsieur the Marquis," Gabelle replied. Later in the evening, the Marquis was in his dining room. He was eating his supper. He looked out of the window. He saw a man outside. "Gabelle!" shouted the Marquis loudly. "There is a man outside the chateau. Who is he?" Gabelle looked out of the window. The night was dark. "There is nobody outside, Monsieur the Marquis," the servant said. Then Gabelle listened. "But I can hear something," he said. "I can hear a coach." "Good! My nephew Charles has arrived," said the Marquis. A few minutes later, Charles Darnay came into the dining room. "Good evening, uncle," he said. "Good evening, Charles," said the Marquis. "How is your life in England?" "My life is good, uncle," said Charles Darnay. "Why do you live in England?" said the Marquis. "You must come back to France. Soon I will die. Then you will be the Marquis Saint-Evremond." "I do not want to be a Marquis," said Darnay. "I do not use the name Saint-Evremond. I do not want to be an aristocrat." "Nonsense," said the Marquis angrily. "You are an aristocrat. We shall talk about this tomorrow." "I do not want to talk about this, uncle," Darnay replied. "I will return to England early in the morning. Good night." The Marquis went to bed. He remembered the dead child in Paris. He remembered the tall man. The man had cried out, "Dead, my child is dead." Gabelle had seen a man holding on to his coach. The Marquis remembered that. He himself had seen a man outside the window of the chateau. He remembered that. Suddenly, the Marquis was afraid. Charles Darnay left the chateau early in the morning. He did not speak to his uncle, and Charles would not speak to him. The Marquis Saint-Evremond was dead. He lay in his bed. A knife was in his chest.